Have you ever wondered what it means to build a nation from the ground up? To take a country freshly freed from colonial rule, scarred, divided, and uncertain, and transform it into a democratic, self-confident republic? That monumental challenge fell upon the shoulders of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first prime minister, and one of the most complex and charismatic figures in modern history. Today, when we speak of India's democracy, its scientific ambitions, or its pluralistic ideals, we are, in many ways, speaking of Nehru's legacy. But who was Nehru, really? What shaped his vision for India? And how much of that vision still lives within us today? Jawaharlal Nehru was born on the 14th of November 1889 in Allahabad, into a family of privilege and intellect. His father, Motilal Nehru, was a wealthy lawyer and a prominent nationalist leader. Growing up in such a household, young Jawaharlal had access to the finest education money could buy, first at Harrow and later at Trinity College, Cambridge. He went on to study law at Inner Temple, London. But here's a question to ponder. What happens when a privileged young man, schooled in the heart of the British Empire, returns to a land oppressed by that same empire? Nehru's Western education exposed him to liberal ideals, democracy, rationalism, and scientific inquiry. But it also made him acutely aware of India's degradation under colonial rule. The contradictions between imperial rhetoric and colonial reality stirred something deep within him. When he returned to India in 1912, he was not yet a revolutionary, but the seeds of rebellion had been sown. It is impossible to understand Nehru without understanding his relationship with Mahatma Gandhi. When Nehru met Gandhi in 1916, he encountered a man utterly unlike himself, simple, ascetic, and deeply rooted in Indian traditions. Gandhi's vision of freedom was moral and spiritual. Nehru's was political and modernist. Yet they found common ground in their dream of a free India. Can two contrasting minds work together toward a shared goal? In the case of Nehru and Gandhi, the answer is a resounding yes, but not without tension. Gandhi appealed to the heart, Nehru to the intellect. Gandhi believed in village-based self-sufficiency. Nehru envisioned an industrial and scientific India. Their partnership was both creative and contentious, a dialectic that shaped the Congress movement in the idea of India itself. One might ask, was Nehru merely Gandhi's political heir, or did he chart his own path? The answer lies in his evolution. While he absorbed Gandhi's moral force, Nehru also injected into the freedom movement a vision of modernity, of dams, universities, factories, and laboratories. He was, as he once described himself, a queer mixture of the East and the West. Nehru's political career was forged in struggle. He was arrested multiple times by the British, spending nearly 9 years in jail in total. It was during these imprisonments that he wrote some of his most profound works, glimpses of world history, an autobiography, and later, the discovery of India. Imagine being confined within prison walls, yet writing about the grand sweep of human civilization, its triumphs and failures, its ideas and revolutions. Could such introspection be what transformed Nehru from a politician into a statesman? Through these writings, Nehru sought to locate India within the broader story of humanity. He saw India not as an isolated civilization, but as part of a global conversation, a participant in the forward march of progress. For him, nationalism was not isolationist, but inclusive. It was about asserting identity without denying universality. This raises an important question. In today's world of rising nationalism, would Nehru's inclusive vision still find resonance? Perhaps it's a question we, as citizens of the 21st century, must keep asking ourselves. When India finally gained independence on the 15th of August, 1947, Nehru stood before the nation to deliver one of the most iconic speeches in history, Tryst with Destiny. His voice trembled with emotion as he declared, "At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom." But that freedom came at a terrible price. Partition. The country was torn apart along religious lines, leading to one of the largest and bloodiest migrations in human history. How must Nehru have felt, the idealist who dreamt of unity, now forced to preside over division? He wept publicly as trains full of massacred refugees arrived in Delhi. Yet he also acted decisively, striving to maintain law and order, rebuild a traumatized capital, and ensure that India's secular foundations held firm. Here's a question worth reflecting upon. In a moment of chaos and hatred, what holds a nation together? Power or principles? Nehru chose the latter. His insistence on secularism was not mere policy, it was moral conviction. He believed that India's strength lay in its diversity, not its uniformity. When Nehru became prime minister, he faced a blank slate. No industrial base, rampant poverty, illiteracy, and the wounds of partition still raw. Yet instead of despairing, he dreamt. His dream was not of empire, but of nation building through science and democracy. He believed political freedom must be followed by economic and intellectual freedom. To this end, he established institutions that still define India's identity today. The Planning Commission, which launched the 5-year plans, the Indian Institutes of Technology, IITs, and Indian Institutes of Management, IIMs, which trained generations of professionals, the Atomic Energy Commission, signaling India's commitment to scientific progress, and perhaps most ambitiously, public sector enterprises that aim to lay the foundation for self-reliant industrial growth. Have you ever considered what it means to dream on behalf of millions? Nehru did. He saw dams as the temples of modern India, symbols of collective effort and scientific achievement. Critics mocked his idealism. Admirers called it visionary. But in both praise and criticism, one thing remained clear. Nehru dared to imagine. And yet, one might ask, did Nehru's socialist approach limit India's economic potential? His emphasis on state control often led to bureaucracy and inefficiency, but perhaps that was inevitable in a fledgling democracy trying to balance growth with equity. In hindsight, his policies were less about economics and more about ethics, the ethics of fairness in an unequal society. In the turbulent geopolitics of the Cold War, Nehru crafted a foreign policy both idealistic and pragmatic, the doctrine of non-alignment. Along with leaders like Tito and Nasser, he sought to keep newly independent nations free from the rival camps of the United States and the Soviet Union. But was non-alignment neutrality, or was it moral leadership? Nehru saw it as the latter. He believed that moral force could guide global politics, that dialogue was preferable to domination. He became the voice of the developing world, eloquent, persuasive, respected. Yet his foreign policy was not without its failures. His trust in China's goodwill proved tragically misplaced. The 1962 Sino-Indian War was a rude awakening. India's humiliating defeat shook Nehru to the core. It was perhaps the most painful episode of his life. Could idealism survive in a world governed by power politics? Nehru's health declined after the war, and so did his faith in the possibility of peaceful coexistence without preparedness. But even in defeat, he remained steadfast in his principles, that nations must strive for peace, not dominance. More than 60 years after his death in 1964, Nehru's legacy continues to evoke both admiration and controversy. To some, he is the visionary who gave India its democratic soul. To others, he is the romantic idealist whose policies slowed India's growth. But can we measure a leader's greatness by outcomes alone? Or should we also judge them by the ideals they instilled in their people? Nehru's greatest achievement, arguably, was not a policy or institution, but a culture of questioning, debate, and freedom. He believed that dissent was essential to democracy. Facts are facts and will not disappear on account of your likes, he once said. In an era of polarization, that line feels more relevant than ever. He also cultivated a deep faith in scientific temper, the idea that rationality, evidence, and inquiry must guide public life. In a country steeped in superstition and orthodoxy, this was revolutionary. He wanted India to be not merely independent, but enlightened. Let's pause and ask ourselves, do we today still live by Nehru's scientific temper? Do we still value reason over rhetoric, inquiry over ideology? The answer to these questions may reveal how far we have come or how far we've drifted from his vision. In May 1964, when Nehru passed away, The entire nation mourned as if a father had died. The crowds that gathered were not just mourning a leader, but an idea. The idea of India as a secular, democratic, forward-looking republic. Today, when we walk through India's universities, research labs, or parliament, we are walking through the corridors of Nehru's imagination. His fingerprints are on our constitution, our institutions, and even our collective conscience. Yet the truest way to honor Nehru is not through statues or anniversaries, but through introspection. As he once said, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. So let us ask ourselves in all honesty, are we still dreamers like Nehru, or have we become cynics? Do we still value the freedom to question, to dissent, to think independently? Can we, like Nehru, balance our traditions with our aspirations for modernity? The answers to these questions will determine not only how we remember Nehru, but how we define India's future.